The advantages include high quality. A lot of them are high quality. There's real-time teacher-student interaction and feedback. There's no time and geographical constraints. However, a lot of times it's very labor-intensive. The control of teaching quality is very difficult, and a lot of times it's very expensive. And here comes the AI-powered adaptive education. It's intended to resolve both the issues of unequal distribution of educational opportunities and the lack of personalized accommodation in traditional classes. Adaptive learning is learning with an education technology that can respond to a student's interactions in real time. However, the concern is that a lot of times the quality really varies. So for us, it's really important to understand how and when this type of intervention works. That brings us to the understanding of or examination of efficacy research of adaptive learning systems. Efficacy studies in the past several years showed that the use of adaptive learning systems is associated with significant student learning gains. Across different types of studies, including meta-analysis and large-scale RCT or quasi-experimental studies, researchers reported positive findings when they compared students who used adaptive learning systems in academic contexts to those who did not. Despite these findings, we know relatively little about for whom and in what context adaptive learning systems work. So today we're gonna talk about the kind of contexts or the kind of challenges or the kind of gaps we might need to think about. One thing we identified is prior knowledge. Many adaptive learning systems personalize the learning experience as students with different prior knowledge may benefit from different instructional features. However, in our study, in our reviews, we found that more research is needed to demonstrate which adaptive learning algorithms and features are best suited to addressing the needs of learners with varying prior knowledge. So there needs to be more studies regarding this prior knowledge specifically. Socio-economic status. Initial research suggests that students from low SES families may benefit from adaptive learning systems in academic settings. For example, Yarnell and her colleagues found that for a study in a college setting, low SES students actually reported more favorable feedback regarding adaptive learning systems. However, more research is needed to explore adaptive learning systems' promise with lower SES students and to elucidate the most effective adaptations for this population. Content areas. We found that the most studies were conducted in engineering and computer science, followed by languages, mathematics, and science. However, content areas like health, social science, art or design, and business management have very few studies using adaptive learning systems. This is actually consistent with prior studies that discussed, the developers and a lot of times researchers, they have relatively limited understanding or domain knowledge in these areas, such as health, social science, art design, and business management. So we call for more attention for these areas for future research. Regarding learning supports, personalized learning content is the most common feature, followed by personalized learning paths, personalized interfaces, personalized diagnosis, and suggestions, personalized recommendations, and personalized prompts or feedback. So the issue is a lot of these personalization features were studied. A meta-analysis of the impact on student learning has not been conducted. So since a lot of times adaptive learning systems incorporate many facets of this kind of personalization, meta-analysis is really important and necessary in this field. Regarding outcomes, as mentioned previously, adaptive learning system is useful and has been shown to be to have positive impacts. However, the outcome really varies. For example, Xie and his colleagues found that positive effects of adaptive learning are more likely to be reported on student affect than on student cognition. Accordingly, more research is needed to distinguish which kind of student factors are more related to the use of adaptive learning systems. We cannot just say adaptive learning system is useful or it's helpful. We have to understand from which aspect, from which factor it's contributing to student development. And also external metrics. While some studies measure academic outcomes solely using kind of system data, a lot of studies have examined adaptive learning using external metrics, such as test scores and standardized tests. However, there was a study by a number of researchers reported that while it positively impacted students' scores on course tests, the use of adaptive learning system didn't have significant effects on course grades or completion rates. So these are all considered external metrics, but still we need to find a way to differentiate the external metrics. For example, in this case, for scores on course tests, course grades, and completion rates, there's a difference here. So future research may examine why and how the external outcomes differ. And finally, there's the region differences. Adaptive learning systems are increasingly common in Western culture, United States, United Kingdom, and other regions. Just a couple of examples, some well-known products like Newton, Assessments, iReady, etc. Meanwhile, in mainland China, adaptive learning systems are only just beginning to gain popularity. While adaptive learning is relatively new in this area, in this region, it's a Chinese education policy priority. So today we're gonna present a case study on how Squirrel AI learning as an adaptive learning systems, the kind of efficacy studies we have conducted, and the call for future research. So right now I'm gonna unshare and have my co-presenter Richard Tong to present. Would you please unmute my?
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Let me switch it over to. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our own efficacy in this whole meta study that Sam and us conducted together. So I want to give you a little bit of introduction of our company. So the way that we approach adaptive learning, right? So it shouldn't take a long time, but it's just to give you a little bit of background of the overall framework that we're using for the for our efficacy study itself. So we do we use comprehensive knowledge graphs and fine-grained level of knowledge point to basically create a recommendation and adaptive algorithms for our system. And the way that we look at it, we came from a belief that we're redefining the education itself, and we believe that any kind of like teach to the middle type of instruction is not efficient, and we think that AI can help to provide the scalability that enable the personalized learning. And we also feel that human coach, in this case, a new role for the teacher, is important because we need to have targeted and social and motivational individual support. So the way that we approach this one is that we, our system, like any other adaptive system, basically goes through the process of diagnosis, adaptive instruction feedback, and collaborative motivation. And the way that, if you look at our AI behind the scene, is that it has the capabilities to use different type of algorithms for the different stages, right? So when we look at the diagnosis and adaptive instruction, the way that we deconstruct the whole knowledge space into these finer level learning points, or the whole knowledge points, and then the recommendation, the interactivity, and the motivation support. So that's comprehensive. So if you look at this, this is a typical map. If you understand Chinese, this is the way that we deconstruct our math for the middle school, and at the top level. And the interface you can see is that every student getting this step-by-step recommendation from our AI. And then you see the classroom look like these. Each student have when they start, they have their own screens and their own adaptive processes, and then they diverge immediately after they start the work. So you can see this is a typical screen for a report, basically, right? You look at the different assessment and the way these assessments are associated with knowledge and how they should be taught, and by step-by-step explanations and so forth. So the focus is efficacy study, and then I want to talk a little bit about what the thing that we have done that's basically going through the whole process of efficacy study, is that we want to look at the three main things: learning efficiency, learning gains, and also learning engagement. The work that has been done is, if you look at it, that we have done a series of these assessment efficacy studies, and then we collaborated heavily with SRI and also third-party evaluation companies to help us to make these studies neutral and also kind of like objective, right? So we use a lot of external measurement to conduct the pre and post test to measure the learning gains and so forth. But the caveat is that because of those limitations, the sample size for these efficacy studies are actually not that large. Normally they're just a couple hundred students, kind of like in that range. And we do fully randomized control trial so that you have a different, efficacy, the test group and the comparison group. And then we use the test format that are really very objective, right? So this way, we're using the external evaluation, like I said, to ensure that the starting and ending for the learning and also all the in-between measurement are objective. We don't intervene in that from our systems. These are all third-party conducted. So if you look at the kind of like the research focus and future is that even given those limitations, I think the overall study has been very satisfactory that we can see really learning gains and learning efficiency and learning engagement improvement between the AI versus traditional classroom comparison. And you saw those papers listed in the previous page because this paper is really about kind of like a more meta study. So we didn't focus on the specific result, and you can definitely check the results from those studies, and they had published papers. Actually, one paper was presented here in 2018 at CSEDU. That was kind of like the first paper that was published. But I think we want to focus more on the kind of like the why question and how question in the future. The why question is that, is AI the key, right? So other than the AI adaptive versus traditional factor, can we incorporate the other learning factors when we do these efficacy studies? And the second one is causality, right? Because there are a lot of factors we feel are associated, but can we tease them out and say which one is has a causal relationship with the learning outcomes that we're targeting? So we're actually working together with CMU using a tool called Tetrad, and we're actually in this next generation of our assessment and efficacy studies. We're going to actually use that also, in addition to the current methodologies. And the how question is that, what are the evaluation measures other than the traditional assessment that we have used before? So those may include things in addition to the third party, we call it objective test, pre and post test. We're actually also going to do internal measurement, including our internal measurement of student proficiency and student forecasted probability of understanding. And a lot of that will use our internal algorithm for those studies. And definitely we want to establish a more larger scale A/B testing mechanism that can do this kind of like online rather than do this separately from our online, and also additional tools for this efficacy study that are beyond the current, again, more statistical tools, and we want to actually use more AI capabilities around that. So I think that's for our part of it. Sam, I'm going to switch it back to you. Again, thank you, and we will entertain some questions after Sam closed the presentation. I'm going to turn back the control back to Sam.
Sounds good. Thank you, Richard. So overall, these results contribute to our understanding of, our understanding of the adaptive learning systems, especially the efficacy of the adaptive learning systems in the last couple of years. So future research might or may need to examine more about why there are differentiated efficacy results in terms of learning characteristics, content areas and features, outcome domains and measures, as well as regional differences. And also, as we discussed, there are so many, there are all kinds of gaps we might want to think about and come together to understand how we're going to fill the gaps. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the nice presentation. We're ready for questions. Okay, I don't see any raised hands and no questions in the chat. So I have a question for Dr. Wang, which is, you said that adaptive learning is effective, but differently for different people, and that we should find out how exactly or what mechanisms
Mhm.
adaptive starts. And my question is actually quite general. Do you have ideas or propositions on how to find this out?
Well, I think one way to find this out is that we actually recruit students from specific population to use the adaptive learning systems and compare the students who do similar students who do not use similar adaptive learning systems. So one way is that we can do RCT, randomized controlled trials. So randomly assign, for example, students of from low SES families. So randomly assign them to the treatment group. So the group uses adaptive learning systems, and the other parts or the rest of the students randomly assigned to the comparison group. So basically, the group doesn't use adaptive learning systems. So we can do such efficacy studies for specific population. And also, we can think about quasi-experimental study designs. So basically, for a population, for a specific population, we use statistical methods. For example, regression discontinuity, or we use other types of like matching algorithms to find a match the sample of control students who are similar to the treatment students, and then understand the differences between the two student population.
Mm. Okay, thank you very much. Let me see if we, so another question appeared. Why are there regional differences?
Richard, would you like to take this one? I think Richard is muted.
I'm sorry. Let me try to. Okay.
Yeah. So I think, well, there's a lot of factors, right? As Sam was talking about earlier, the learning factors that affect the adaptive learning, a lot of time basing on the factors that are we call non-systematical, right? Basically, that like prior knowledge, the way that the student followed instruction, the way that the student engaged with different type of content, and the way that how human coach or other factors in the adaptive learning environment are used, right? All of that contribute to the efficacy itself. Like for example, one of the things that when I was at Newton, we conducted a lot of tests regarding the efficacy of a large scale, like college student who are using these adaptive homework systems. Is that you can see that the student who actually are using the system enough, there's a really good efficacy result. But how students follow instructions or basically follow the recommendations, from both the class instructor as well as the adaptive system after they are engaging with that, play a big role. So if you go to China, I mean, the Chinese kids are more obedient, or they kind of like follows the, if they are assigned homework, there is a much higher level of completion. But say in Maryland or Arizona State University, then we see a much lower population percentage or that are following that. So you see the differentiation, right, in terms of how that factors can be used. And definitely, even in K-12, which is our space, the kids who have better equipment and other distraction factors actually tend to get distracted easier, right? But if you go to this, like Sam talking about, like this low SES student, where they don't have a lot of the equipment and they actually have a higher curiosity factor, when they are engaged with the interactive media, they actually show better engagement, right? And that's also play a big factor, right? So I can say that that's why we want to conduct future studies that incorporating these factors, and when we do random control trials, and then put into better measurement around them. So
okay, thank you very much for the answers. Thank you very much to all presenters for the presentation. I would like to close this session, and once again, thank you very much and have fun at the rest of the conference. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.